Tamil are also different. Tamil
Because then I could speak in German, that is for me easier, and then when it's translated,
Yeah.
Should I speak in
English? No, you should speak in Kannada.
Sure, no problem.
I think that's the sort of everything. Yeah. Say no.
Can you, would you be able to summarize what the law is saying at the end, just to summarize it, right? And then the people will have special interviews with them later, but for the press conference, then summarize it and then you can speak in English. Is that okay?
Or a guy who is speaking German, and then you can translate. I know. I don't know.
But he says that because he does better in German.
Yeah.
German.
So
Okay. Okay.
We insist on English, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. You know German, that's very good. You can understand and
you can also think about you can also, it's up to you. Yes. So, yes. So we want to start. We want to start this press conference. When the press conference is organized by the Internationale Menschenrechtsverein Bremen, you might think it's a little bit strange that a Bremen organization is doing it. This is because this case, that is this big case, this Tamil case, there was a case like that also in Germany a few years ago, right? So there's a continuity to it. It's not just in Switzerland these things are happening, right? So this is the context in which we have been involved. We have been involved in the German case. We have looked at it, and we have also investigated the Swiss case, and there's a continuity, and that's why it's by the Menschenrechtsverein Bremen. We want to introduce, first of all, the speakers, right? And then the main speakers will say something, and then after that there can be a discussion. People can ask questions, right? We have people from different countries here. We have Thirumurugan Gandhi. People will know he's a well-known social activist from Tamil Nadu in India, right? And in fact, he has had to he had to leave a struggle there, a very hard struggle in Tamil Nadu, where more than 10 people, maybe up to 20, 30 people have been killed while demonstrating. Yeah? So we are very happy that he's able to spend the time to come here, and he has to go back. And then I have Andy Higginbottom. He's a lecturer in the University of Kingston, associated professor, and he specializes in human rights issues and economic issues, right? And he has been active on this subject for a long time, and he was the prosecutor at the tribunal, the People's Tribunal on Sri Lanka in Bremen. He prosecuted that the government of Sri Lanka, he argued that the government of Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan state actually was responsible for genocide against the Elam Tamils. Yeah? And Gajendra Kumar Ponnambalam, who's come from Sri Lanka, he's a leading politician, known for his principled position on the Tamil issue. He has not compromised on the fundamental principles, even after the resistance movement had been exterminated by the war, right? And then there's Marcel Bossone, who is the lawyer for the Tamil people for a long time. He's defending one of the people who's accused, and he generally knows about the issue, the history of the issue very well, and he's well known for this, and he's a very respected lawyer from the Tamil people, and I think from oppressed people who all over the world that he has defended. So I would like to start off with Andy Higginbottom, and he will just talk about the political motivation behind the trial. Because the trial, it's a legal trial, and the courts and the process always tries to say that this is a purely legal matter, it's a criminal matter. But the prosecutor's argument has been well before the case. It has been all over the press. So there's a political. There's been, the prosecutor has used the press like a megaphone in a way. So there is no way you can. The political background to the trial is very important. You cannot just ignore it. You cannot say it's not political because it's in the press, even before the trial starts, in a very strong way and in a very anti-Tamil way. Yeah. So we start with Andy.
So we are holding this conference in Switzerland, which, as everybody knows, is the home of the United Nations, certainly Geneva. The context of this trial is a complete failure of the United Nations and all international institutions to protect the human rights of Tamil people in Sri Lanka. As Viraj said, I was a co-prosecutor of the International Tribunal in Bremen in 2013, and in the absence of any effective action by the United Nations, this People's Tribunal took place, and it made some quite important findings on the basis of the evidence that we were able to put to it. The first finding is that a genocide has taken place in Sri Lanka with its awful crescendo in the killing fields in May 2009. The second conclusion of the tribunal was that this genocide is not limited to one event, awful as that was, but is part of an ongoing genocidal process, which is indeed ongoing to this day in the north and east of Sri Lanka. The third conclusion of the tribunal in Bremen was that there has been complicity of both the United States and the UK governments in this genocidal process. Now, I shouldn't need to remind you that complicity with genocide is itself a crime against humanity. So, the Bremen Tribunal came to a broad conclusion that the Western powers, the US and UK in particular, bear co-responsibility for the genocide against the Tamils. This is a really important finding. And the main evidence that was put to the tribunal concerns the conduct of the US and UK in the late 1990s and especially in the 2000 period. So, as is known in the Tamil community, there was a peace process which took place between 2002 and 2006. The UK government had a policy of trying to destroy the peace process even before it began. So the UK banned the LTTE in 2001, and it promoted and furthered an EU-wide ban, and in fact the UK used its presidency of the EU in particular to push forward its agenda of banning the LTTE. Now, why this is so important is that in the midst of a peace dialogue between the LTTE and the Sri Lankan government, for the Western powers to ban the LTTE was absolutely clearly in order to scupper the very peace process. So the intent of both the UK and the US was there would not be a peaceful solution to the conflict in Sri Lanka. That the only solution, therefore, which they were pushing for was a continuation of the war. And of course it was that agenda which, with its awful consequences, was indeed played out after the failure of the peace talks, their collapse in 2006. So between 2006 and 2009, we have a return to an all-out war, which is conducted by the Sri Lankan armed forces, a total war against the Tamil population with the backing of the US and the UK. The EU ban on LTTE was rather reluctantly agreed to by the other nations of the EU. In particular, we think that Germany was quite reluctant to accept the ban. But in the end, the EU did accept the ban on the LTTE. But that left a situation in Europe where Switzerland suddenly became very important. Because not being in the EU, and in particular with its independent ethos of neutrality, it became a focal point for the possibility of continuing dialogue, searching for a peaceful solution to the conflict. So we have in Switzerland the continuation of talks towards peace even after the EU itself had banned the LTTE. So in this circumstance, the fact that Switzerland's neutrality meant that it was facilitating the possibility of a peaceful solution. Now, what ensued from that time onwards was an extension of the UK policy towards the EU, but now directed with its focus on shifting the position of the authorities in Switzerland from their position of neutrality, from their position of accepting that there were two forces in this conflict, to one where one side was treated as criminal. And the side that became criminalized was not the Sri Lankan state was not the author of the genocidal violence, but the side that became criminalized from just after 2006 onwards in a step-by-step process was in fact the Tamil diaspora here in Switzerland because of their support for Tamil self-determination. There are two narratives to the trial, and the narrative of the right of the Tamil people to self-determination is the narrative that has been criminalized through the bringing of this prosecution. The UK authorities have not only pushed for a war solution to the conflict in Sri Lanka, they have also made every effort to criminalise Tamils, and now it transpires they are making every effort to prevent the Tamil diaspora from speaking the truth about the genocide that has taken place. If you look at the Guardian newspaper, the London Guardian's report of Wednesday this week, you will see that the British authorities are going to great lengths to hide the truth of their own role in the war. So a report by Phil Miller has uncovered the fact that the British Foreign Office destroyed 195 files concerning its own operations in a very short time window between 1978 and 1980, just a 2-year time period. Almost all of the files have been destroyed. And the topics which those files cover include security cooperation, arms sales, foreign aid, and Tamil requests for asylum in the UK. And if you look at the next level of detail down, what you can see is indicated by the titles of these files was that there was an intense degree of cooperation between the British military, the British intelligence planners, and the Sri Lankan High Command of the Armed Forces, with British policy shapers going to Sri Lanka to prepare analysis reports of the security situation. Those are the reports that have been destroyed. So we know that the reports were drawn up, but we don't know from the Foreign Office files, which are now destroyed, what their content was. But it's not hard to piece together what was going on, because from other information it was very clear that this was the beginning, really, of the armed conflict. And the Tamil movement, the LTTE, were beginning to conduct armed operations against the Sri Lankan state. And so you have a situation where the Sri Lankan state is looking for counterinsurgency support. And the British authorities are supplying counterinsurgency support in the form both of official and unofficial mechanisms. The official mechanisms include, for example, the SAS, the Special Armed Forces. And the British were applying their particular expertise in Special Armed Forces operations in Sri Lanka in this period. We know this from other sources, but we don't have the files from the Foreign Office because they've destroyed them. So we have, on the one hand, the Sri Lankan state is being supported in its narrative right from that period to today of defining what the war was all about by the British authorities. So now we come to the trial in Switzerland. Why is it taking place at all is really the big question. The bank has been paid back nearly all its money. So from one point of view, the trial is completely gratuitous. I mean, what is its point? The LTTE was not banned in Switzerland. On the contrary, in line, as I've already mentioned, with Switzerland's tradition, it was treated as a legitimate actor in a conflict. It was treated with a degree of respect and recognition which the US and the UK set out to destroy. That's the purpose of the criminalisation of the Tamils in Switzerland. sometime after 2006, sometime around 2008, 2009, the major crime organisation in my country, the UK, the Serious Organised Crime Authority, started to mount an operation which was intended to frame Tamils in Switzerland of conduits for funding towards the movement in Sri Lanka, towards the Tamil movement in Sri Lanka. This was a setup, it was a sting. But what this original sting operation did was it shifted the mindset of the prosecution authorities here in Switzerland away from their conscious and conscientious position of neutrality
Audio Jungle.
Because then I could speak in German, that would, for me, be easier. And then it's the translated.
Yeah.
Should I speak in?
No, you should speak in Tamil.
Sure, no problem.
That's the sort of everything. Yeah. Same as you.
Would you be able to summarize what the law is saying at the end, just to summarize it, right? And then the people will have special interviews with them later, but for the press conference, then summarize it and then you can speak in English. Is that okay?
Or a guy who is speaking German, and then you can translate. I know. I don't know.
But he says that because it's in German.
Yeah.
German. Okay. Okay.
We insist on English, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. You know German, that's very good. You can understand any translation.
You can also English. You can also, it's up to you. Yes. So, yes. So we want to start. We want to start this press conference. When the press conference is organized by the Internationale Menschenrechtsverein Bremen, you might think it's a little bit strange that a Bremen organization is doing it. This is because this case, that is this big case, this terror case, there was a case like that also in Germany a few years ago, right? So there's a continuity to it. It's not just in Switzerland these things are happening, right? So this is the context in which we have been involved. We have been involved in the German case. We have looked at it, and we have also investigated the Swiss case, and there's a continuity, and that's why it's by the Menschenrechtsverein Bremen. We want to
Cảm ơn buổi chủ